and welcome to the local campaign. I'm Justine Fraser. This is the Cambridge All Candidates debate for the 2022 provincial election. The candidates running in this riding are Marjorie Knight for the Ontario NDP, Brian Riddell for the PC Party of Ontario, and Sharika Shenoy for the Ontario Liberal Party. Carla Johnson of the Green Party of Ontario is also running but was unable to attend tonight's debate, and Belinda Carhalios of the New Blue Party is also running but did not respond to our invitation for the debate. To begin our debate, each candidate will now have 2 minutes for an opening statement. First up is Marjorie.
Thank you. My name is Marjorie Knight. I work in the Cambridge community as a family outreach worker, and I see and hear what's going on in the community. People are struggling. There is a struggle to find or maintain housing. People have been priced out. Seniors can't afford their homes. Moms can't go to work because they can't afford childcare. The youth unable to find work and overburdened by student loans. It's time to invest in people. We are barely living. We need not just to live, but to thrive. The Ontario NDP has an ambitious vision that offers hope to us all. We will build houses that people need and can afford. We will bring back rent control. We will invest in the things that matter most to everyone: healthcare, education, and seniors care, while being fiscally responsible in the choices we make. My name is Marjorie Knight. I'm running to be your next MPP. I believe that the people of Cambridge deserve better. You deserve an MPP who will fight for you. I am that person. Thank you.
Next is Brian.
Hi, my name is Brian Riddell. I'm the PC candidate for the Cambridge riding. I was born and raised in Cambridge. I've raised my family here. I'm a graduate of Wilfrid Laurier University and Conestoga College. I'm also a tradesperson. I'm a licensed millwright. I got into this because I could see the changes happen over the last few years that I was not really pleased with. And that's why I decided to put my name forward. And I decided to put my name forward with a Progressive Conservative Party of Ontario. Reasons why: because they had a solid plan to move forward to the next stage after our COVID epidemic, to stay open, to build infrastructure, to build trades, to build roads up to the Ring of Fire so that we could promote electric vehicles. And that's where we're going. And healthcare, one of the most important things of all. And like I said, about putting $40 billion into this is something we need to do. Build 1.5 million houses. That's another part of our plan. And like I said, if we hadn't had COVID, Doug Ford could have done a lot more. But unfortunately, we did. And this is why I'm sitting here today wanting to be your next MPP. And I want to do my best to promote myself into that position to help Cambridge. Thank you very much.
And last, we have Sharika Shenoy with her opening statement.
Good evening. My name is Sureka Shenoy, your Liberal candidate for Cambridge. It would be a privilege and an honor to represent you and serve as your MPP. Those who know me have seen me work tirelessly in this region through my work as board director and past chair of the Cambridge Memorial Hospital Foundation. Some of you have attended the popular CMH diversity outreach dinners that I championed over 10 years ago. We connected with over 60 diverse communities in this region, as I believe it's important to have a dialogue with all to make this an inclusive community. I currently sit on the board of directors for Hospice of Waterloo Region. I'm also one of the co-chairs for the East Indian Community Walkathon of Waterloo Region, which has raised over $400,000 for local hospitals. I have been a longtime volunteer for the soup kitchen at Trinity Anglican Church for many years. I'm a past mentor for the Leadership Waterloo Region Youth on Board program. Besides youth, I also mentor young professionals and small businesses to set them up for success. Outside of Waterloo region, while working in Toronto, I volunteered my time mentoring new immigrants to integrate into the workforce by successfully helping them find employment in their area of expertise. In addition, I sat on subcommittees advancing visible minorities and Indigenous peoples files at my workplace. As a professional, I spent most of my career as an executive managing the small business portfolio for a leading financial institution. Originally from India, I came to Regina, Saskatchewan over 33 years ago to do my master's in industrial systems engineering and later did my MBA in finance and operations from Laurier. I'm troubled by the many issues facing us today, such as housing, affordability, and the near threat of homelessness, our healthcare system, climate change, education, and economy. I'm here today hoping to make the case for you to choose me as your next MPP for Cambridge on June 2nd.
We'll now begin the question and answer portion of the debate. Tonight, I'm joined by James Sebastian Scott from City News 570, and he will start things off with the first question.
Thanks, Justine. As many of us have known through the COVID-19 pandemic, we have seen our healthcare system really strapped with the ability of us to care for our patients, not just in our region, but in our province as well. And this has been an issue that we have seen for quite some time in our province. What does your party, or what can you do as the next MPP for Cambridge to ensure that the quality of care for our residents of Waterloo region and the province don't have to deal with issues like hallway healthcare or issues with not getting the care that they need if they're suffering from something like COVID-19?
Our first person to respond will be Marjorie Knight.
Thank you for your question. Our healthcare has been in trouble over the last 2 decades. We have had a lot of cuts in funding. We have seen privatization of parts of our medical care, and we have seen an exodus of nursing staff and other healthcare workers. We need to fix this, and the way we need to do this is to once again invest in our healthcare. We need to do away completely with Bill 124. We have nurses leaving in droves. We have nurses who have come from other countries who are unable to practice. We have patients without beds. We have beds without nurses. In this kind of a climate, healthcare is not going to be able to be given in any meaningful way. What can we do? The first thing we need to do is we need to find a way to accredit those nurses coming from other countries. We need more than 3,000 nurses. We need to get them in. We need to fund our healthcare. We need to fund pharmacare for our people. We need to fund mental health for our people. We need to provide these things under the government, under OHIP, so that people can afford it. Part of the unaffordability of living in Ontario right now is being unable to access medical help, unable to access mental health. These are parts of the whole thing that we need to look at. But the bottom line is we need to start funding our healthcare so that we get what we need to see. More workers, more nurses, more doctors.
Brian, it is now your turn to answer.
Thank you. So like I said earlier, there's going to be $40 billion put into the healthcare system in Ontario over the next 10 years. I agree that we need to accredit nurses and doctors coming from foreign lands into our country. Currently, we have a program for PSWs that can go to school at no charge and come out. But we've had 15 years of prior Liberal government that basically cut beds, cut nursing, and cut the system. Doug Ford's government right now is the only one capable of really coming in and straightening everything out, and that's what we're doing. Like I said earlier, we've had 13,000 deaths from COVID-19 in Ontario, which is quite low considering the rest of the world. Without this, we'd be in a worse mess than we could have been in. And I think we've done an excellent job in working towards that, but more needs to be done. And that's what the goal is. And that's why I want to represent Cambridge as the next MPP for this area. Thank you.
Sharika, it is now your turn to answer.
Thank you. I'm impressed that my colleague here said the current government, or we saw the least number of deaths. I am not sure where those numbers come from. One death is too many. But first of all, we had the worst record. Ontario had the worst record in terms of long-term care deaths, in not just in this country, but across the G7 countries. It was a shame. A country like Canada and a province like Ontario had the largest number of long-term deaths. We all know how our long-term care facilities suffered, and we saw the gaps. The last, in fact, my colleague here also reminded us about the previous government when we were told it was hallway medicine that the Liberals had done. Let me tell you, it has gone to the streets, the healthcare right now. Not only have we didn't have beds for people, we couldn't even attend today. The backlog in our surgeries is so big that most of us people don't seem to get their surgeries done. What did we identify during this last few years with this Ford government? Gaps in our healthcare system identified during the pandemic include quality standards for our long-term care were absent. This government, who is claiming to put $40 billion into the healthcare system, cut government funding, gutted the systems, and removed inspections of long-term care facilities, leading to this tragic death of seniors. Staffing controls. We saw a lack of infection control support, lack of testing kits. We saw how the government, even today, I'm not sure why, we cannot have access to testing kits. So I am not sure how I can be proud of what this government has done. It has been an embarrassment, and healthcare has been a great issue. And we Liberals have a great plan to overcome this surgical backlog. And I can get into that in the next segment.
And the next question is, what do you think is the biggest issue in this election for voters? We're going to start this one off with Brian.
I would say the biggest concern hitting Ontario residents today is affordability. Unfortunately, we don't set the price of oil and gasoline products in Ontario. They're set from outside the country. And that's something we're going to deal with. And we have a plan to come out and do a reduction of 5.7 cents on a liter of fuel. And that's just the beginning. But remember, that's where a lot of our roads and infrastructure is built from, is those taxes. So we still need them. But my respected Liberal candidate, let me just remind her that they also wasted over $1 billion on a gas plant, and it was a scandal that one of their people ended up going to jail for. Thank you.
And Sharika, if you want to respond, you get 30 seconds to respond.
Absolutely. So the $1 billion gas cuts because of the nuclear plant is all well known. Let me remind you what this government has done in the last 4 years. There has been $1 billion plus in terms of penalties that the taxpayer paid because of cancellation of the beer contract for Buck a Beer. And let me tell you that Buck a Beer never materialized. So that is the first thing I would say, remind Ontarians. I want all our Ontarians to go, and this community, to go to Food Tracker cuts and see the numerous cuts this government has done over the last 4 years. It's so many that we have become immunized to the cuts. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharika. And we're going to go back to James Sebastian Scott for our next question. Oh, wait, sorry. No, Marjorie gets a chance to answer now. Sorry.
The biggest issue facing Ontarians right now is housing. We have no housing in Ontario. Our homeless rates are rising. In our shelter in Cambridge, we're noticing that the fastest growing population that we see now are seniors and people living with disabilities. People are unable to afford buying a house, and people are unable to find housing that they can rent that is affordable for them. This is a problem. May I even go on to say that when people talk about the gateway drug is homelessness. Because if you do not have a safe place to lay your head, what follows is not going to be good. And it just goes downhill from there. We are going to fix this. We are going to get back into the business of building. We are going to go back into rent control. We're going to stop renovictions. We are going to help young couples who are buying their first house. We are going to give equity loans up to 10% of the purchase price of a house, which will make it much easier for younger people to buy their first home. For those who are the most vulnerable, we will have direct subsidies helping them to pay rent. We believe that we need to fix this problem. It is the largest problem that I see in our society right now, and Cambridge certainly is no exception. Housing, we need to fix it, and we will. The Ontario NDP is going to make sure that people have somewhere safe to call home, and we will reduce significantly those that are living on the streets and in shelters. Thank you.
So the question is, what do you think is the biggest issue in this election for voters?
Okay, thank you. So in my perspective, affordability for Ontario citizens is the single biggest issue facing us. Everyday life has become very expensive for Ontario families. Ontario Liberals have a balanced, progressive, and fully costed plan to help families with rising costs. As a cornerstone of this plan, we are slashing all public transit fares across the province to buck a ride, saving many commuters hundreds every month. We will remove the provincial harmonized sales tax, a HST of prepared foods under $20, allowing people to save every time you pick up a soup or a salad, grab a sandwich or a rotisserie chicken for dinner. We will pay for this initiative with fairer taxes for corporations, taxing large corporations. We are bringing forward an ambitious plan to tackle the housing affordability crisis by prioritizing people living in these homes, not speculators. We want to build 1.5 million homes in the next 10 years. Ontario Liberals will help those who need it the most with a 20% increase over to those on Ontario Disability Support Program, $1,000 pension top-up for seniors who need it most, and increased minimum wages that transition into real living wages. In every part of our plan, housing, economic growth, healthcare, education, and climate action, we have thought about how to drive down costs and create an Ontario that people can afford to live in. Thank you.
And for our next question, James Sebastian Scott will ask.
Thanks, Justine. Through the pandemic, we have seen very many small businesses affected and having to shut down, not just in our communities, but across the province as well. What commitment does your party have to ensure that small businesses don't have to do that again?
Sharika, I'm going to let you have the first answer this time.
So small businesses are the cornerstone of any community's success or a country's success. We know that, and we've seen that. So it's important to support our small businesses. We have seen them suffer through this pandemic for the last 2 years due to the incompetency of this government. So one of the first things we want to do is support small businesses by removing those who have suffered in the last 2 years, by removing the corporate small business taxes for them to help them come up to speed and catch up. We also want to remove incorporation fees for the small businesses because they find this as a barrier to enter the business. So this is something we want to do. In addition, we want to help small businesses in terms of retaining talent. It's important that today there is an acute shortage of labor, and labor employees have the say today because they also move from place to place, finding better benefits. And our liberal government will introduce portable benefits so that employees will not need to move from place to place to looking for better benefits. That is something we are proud to do. We also want to introduce 10 paid sick leave for employees, but at the same time look after small businesses by helping them paying them up to $200 per day for paid sick leave. This will help small businesses come up and not suffer the consequences of paid sick leave, which this Ford government would not allow our frontline heroes, as this government called them, by capping their salaries and also not giving them sick leave, especially during the pandemic. So there are many things that the Liberal government is planning to introduce should we get the mandate on June 2nd. Thank you.
Brian, it is now your turn to respond or to answer.
Let's be straight on this. So the whole situation was COVID hit us. We had no choice but to shut down business. We didn't have any antiviral pills or any real systems to control it. So we had to do what we had to do. But since then, we do have these features that we can use to stay open. And one of the pledges that Doug Ford has made is we will not close again. And that's the whole thing right there in a nutshell. As far as, like I said, about affordability and small businesses, one of my personal things is I started out in the trades. I'm a licensed millwright. I also have 25 years experience as a national sales manager for a major tire company. And today I teach, I'm a professor at Conestoga College. So I'm in touch with students. I teach disability students in the campus in Milton, and I understand where people are coming from. And what my whole point is the trades. A person can go to school, get a trade, and build up his whole career and build up his own business and create a small business. It's the small businesses of Ontario that really push us forward, not the large ones. And that's what's critical to moving forward in the province. And like I will remind my esteemed colleague from the Liberal Party, Wynne and DeLuca lost 300,000 jobs in Ontario in their term. We're building jobs. Right now we have a unemployment rate in Ontario, 7.2, which is quite low. And we need to bring people in to fill these jobs. You drive around, you can see everywhere people are looking for workers. Thank you.
Marjorie, it's now your turn.
Thank you very much. So small businesses went through a very tough time during the pandemic. That was very clear to us all. Many of them had to close down. Many struggled with having employees turn up because they were sick or unable to come to work. One of the things that we also noticed is that there was supposed to be a supportive fund for small businesses so that they could apply to that to tide them over the pandemic. Sadly, many of them could not qualify for it, and the process was so difficult that many gave up without even being able to get any money, and so they closed down. One of the things that we need to do is to find a process by which we can help small businesses and that we can finance them through times like this. No one of us can say that another pandemic might not happen. No one of us can say that we might not be forced at some point to close down. What we can say is that we will support small business should this happen again, and we should help them to make sure they can tide over and tide over their employees so that they have employees to come back to their jobs. We need to stop looking at big business and look at small business. That's 90% of who provides jobs in this community. We need to look at training and co-op and helping students get to the job that they can do. We also need to look at our climate and our Green New Deal, where we're going to be doing a lot of electric cars and electrifying our transit and all the other peripheral things that are going to come from that. Are we training people for that? We can retool, refit our manufacturing, boost it again, provide more jobs. Business, it's going to be booming in an electric era, and we are entering that now.
And our
Do I
next
get to, do I get to 30 seconds because my friend Brian said
Sure.
the
If
quote.
you want 30 seconds, that's fine. Go for it.
So, my colleague here said about losing jobs. Let me remind how many businesses shut down during this pandemic. Small businesses, in fact, my campaign office was a small business. They shut down because of the pandemic. Let me tell you, the pandemic was new to us. Yes, every country faced the same issues. But what was missing here was competency from this government. They would not follow the signs, would not take decisive action when it was needed. They shut down small businesses, let big corporations be open, and let like the big retail box stores could sell everything except the small businesses. It was no friend for small businesses. It was definitely a friend for the large corporations. Thank you.
What is the single biggest lesson that you learned from the pandemic that you would take with you? And we'll start things off with Marjorie.
I think one of the biggest lessons I've learned is how important public health is, how we need public health. Unfortunately, many of our public health entities were closed down prior to the pandemic. And therefore, when it happened, we weren't caught unprepared. The other thing is that when we first had SARS, we came up with a comprehensive plan after an extensive investigation and inquiry. And we came up with a list of things that needed to be done and things that needed to be in place and ready in the event that we had a pandemic. And sadly, when we did have the pandemic, things had not been followed through on. PPE that was in storage was outdated, and the whole plan was thrown out. What we learned is that plans are important, and we need to maintain and follow through on these plans. If we don't, what resulted is what happens, and we can never go back there again. Thank you.
And Sharika, you can answer next.
Thank you. Very important lessons that we learned from this. One of the first things I would say, the biggest is mental health and isolation, social isolation. I think we all understood what social isolation means for us seniors and the elderly. We spoke about it, but when we experienced it, we understand what it means for social isolation and mental health. I think this is one of the biggest things that came out, besides, like my colleague said here about public health, how important it is to keep it robust. This government has canceled all funding to those associations and in fact refused to follow the science, keeping our chief medical officer in the background and leading the show. We found out we should have PPE testing kits, which this government, though the federal government had provided ample supply of testing kits, stockpiled on 4.5 million kits and never provided it to people when we needed it. So there are many things that we found out about having inspections, making sure we have our safety control measures in place. All these things are some things good. I don't know if I say highlighted the need to have proper resources in place and not cut funding to them. I keep repeating, just go to the Ontario Ford Tracker to find out all the cuts that were done, which exacerbated the issues we faced during the pandemic. Thank you.
Brian, it is now your turn to answer.
Thank you. So let's look at the reality of what happened. We didn't have PPE available to us because we're bringing it in from foreign countries and it was expired. Not just from us, it's been sitting in storage for years. We developed and we promoted and financed companies to develop PPE. Two of the largest producers of PPE masks today are in Cambridge. One of the most revolutionary things happened is the ultraviolet light built on a robot from a Cambridge company can go and disinfect a building. These people were funded by the provincial government. Science is something that changes all the time. It's not constant. And what the progressive conservative government does is listen to doctors. And like I said, science changes. It's not the same all the time. And as it changes, we have to adapt to it. So it's not really fair to say we didn't listen to it. We did. And Doug Ford, he did his very best to make sure we were protected. And that's why we have such a low death rate. Long-term care homes, I can tell you from my personal experience with my mother and father-in-law, right now they're in lockdown because of the COVID virus. And it's sad, but it protects them. Like they're 85 years old. I don't want anything to happen to them. And everybody else in that same situation doesn't. Testing kits were not available like they should be because the whole world as a marketplace was after them. They were short in the States, they were short in Canada. So they weren't available. We couldn't get them. And we did our very best to make sure we could. Thank you.
And for our next question, we're going to go back to James Sebastian Scott. James?
2A All Day Go is something that has been long promised to our region and to connect us to better talent in our tech industry in this region. And right now, I know companies are busing in some of the talent that they need in order to operate properly, to ensure that their staffing levels are performing at a very high level. With the current timeline for 2A All Day Go, does your party have a plan in place to make sure that that timeline stays on track and that 2A All Day Go is not delayed again for our region?
First answer is from Brian.
So I'll give you a good example. My wife worked for BlackBerry. She was a director of security for them. Today she works for NetSuite. There's no reason that we should not become an IT capital of Canada. We have Ottawa, we have Waterloo, we have all these people that have high levels of abilities in the IT market that we could not develop this. And what my dream is for the area of Cambridge is to become another Silicon Valley for Canada. We have the people, we have the infrastructure that we need to build, and we can do it. And I would see they're high-paying jobs with good results and really good ways of being able to do affordability, to build those houses that people are having problems to afford and get through this whole financial mess that's been caused by a war in Ukraine and COVID epidemic. So if we can develop that and bring it into Cambridge and North Dumfries, I think that would be an excellent idea. And I'm 100% for that. I work for a small company in San Francisco, a Silicon Valley startup. So I know how they start, and they have to be funded. And we will have the programs available to them that are out there now, that they can have startups here. We can use the talent we have from this area, and we can move forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Sharika, you're next.
Thank you. I was losing the connection. So here we go. I like Brian saying that we should have two-way go for this region. I commuted to Toronto for over 12 years. I took the Greyhound and I know what it means and what it costs to travel to Toronto. I had a monthly pass, which was almost like a mortgage those days. Let me tell you what this Ford government is doing. I think it was 2 days ago, they made an announcement, Ford for drivers. That is not called transit. That is called putting more cars on the road, putting more pollution on the road for our community. That is not what I call helpful to improving transit. Our Liberal government has promised buck a ride to anywhere within the province which means making it affordable, taking more cars off the road. And we have promised two-way go. I think two-way go will become a reality. For a long time, we have tried making Cambridge a two-way to Milton to Toronto, but I don't think that's going to happen because of some of the obstacles we face. But of course, I didn't see anything happen from this government in terms of that. However, Kitchener Go, I think, is a two-way go, would be a great idea, would help connect the two cities together and make living much easier for people in Kitchener traveling to Kitchener, Cambridge, Waterloo, traveling to Toronto. I spent 4 hours a day on the road away from my family. So I believe having two-way go transit would be a great win for our community here. And also a liberal policy of $1 a ride would greatly improve affordability for commuters and people alike. Thank you.
Marjorie, it's now your turn to answer.
Thank you. Transit, it is very important. And I am listening to Sharika talk about that long commute that she had to Toronto, which brings me to mind about the fact that I used to work in Kitchener, and it would take me an hour and a half to 2 hours to get to my job by bus from Cambridge. We have a problem with transit, and we need to fix it. Apart from the fact that we need to electrify and as soon as possible so that we can be responsible about our carbon footprint, but we also need to look at our transit on a whole. We need to look about transit that moves us around our region, because we work in all sectors of our region. And it's almost silly to think that it takes the same time to go to work in Toronto as it does to go to work from Cambridge to Kitchener. Two-way go service. We need two-way all day service to Toronto. I remember being in a meeting at Communitech, and they were talking about the fact that it was hard to attract people to come to our region because of the transportation, because it was too difficult to get from Toronto to the Waterloo region and back, and then to fly out and to fly in, because apparently there's a lot of movement in there. There was also the problem about housing. Could they afford to buy houses in the area to stay, to bring their families? All of this is connected, but we have to deal with our transit. I don't believe a buck a trip is going to help. I believe funding, fully funding our transit system is going to help. We have cut funding to our transit system by 50% over the last 10 years. Let's put some money back in it and make it work for all of us.
Can I do a rebuttal to that?
Yeah, you have 30 seconds.
Okay, so part of the infrastructure program is to build highways. Highway 7 to Guelph is one example. We're building highways up to the Ring of Fire, which is going to give us more jobs, more infrastructure so people can get there, so they can get higher priced jobs and make more money. So we are doing that. When I was a child, I remember my great grandmother taking me to the CNE out of Cambridge, or out of Galt, I'm sorry, to the CNE. There's no reason why we shouldn't have that. And we can get that if we push for it. That's one of my objectives.
Thanks, Brian. And the next question is, what would you do if elected to tackle the housing crisis, both short and long term?
So one of the things facing everybody here is housing. There's no question. Housing is a big issue facing. I'm worried about my children and how anyone can afford a house today. Under this government, in the last, prices have skyrocketed by over $500,000. I'm not sure how we can afford $1 million in this small community of Cambridge. But what are we doing? Our Liberal government has promised that we would increase the supply of housing by building 1.5 million homes over the next 10 years. That is something we are very proud of, and making sure that we bring in more supply to cool down the skyrocketing prices. We also have said we will start Ontario Home Building Corporation to help people buy homes. These are the first-time home buyers, wherein we would have not for affordable housing and social housing, supportive housing that would be done through this. We want to make sure people who are eligible to buy homes are only first-time home buyers, helping them have the dream of owning a home, make it a reality. We are also planning to introduce housing for Indigenous people. We want to introduce not-for-profit homes, making sure our building corporations where we don't allow people to speculate. Because today we have also said that we would introduce a use it or lose it levy on people who have bought lands and are sitting on it, speculating on when to build. We would do that. And also make sure that we would introduce rent control to make sure the prices today, rent has skyrocketed similarly. Thank you. I see my timer has gone off.
Thank you. Yes, the screen's freezing on me a little bit. Thank you. And Marjorie, it's your turn to answer.
I guess we could say we have a housing crisis on our hands. The dream of home ownership has really flown out of reach for many. There are a few things that we plan on doing. One of the first things that we need to do is look at is what kind of houses are being built. Yes, we are getting back into the business of building homes, but what kind of homes are we going to build? We are looking at building homes such as co-ops, the middle income type of housing. We're going to look at townhouses, row houses, those kinds of houses that are not being built right now, not single big houses. We're done with those. We're looking for the kind of housing that the middle income people can afford. We're also going to be building supportive housing, and we're going to be building accessible housing. One of the things that we know is that those who are losing homes are people living with disabilities and seniors, particularly. Young families trying to buy their first homes are having a really hard time. We are going to have a new agency called Housing Ontario, and we're going to provide 10% of a down payment as an equity loan to help youngsters buy their first home. We're going to look at zoning rules. We're going to update them. We're going to look at inclusionary zones. We are going to reinstate rent control. We're going to stop rent evictions. We're going to stop raising rent rates in between tenants. We're going to have a portable housing benefit. And we are going to crack down on speculation through increased non-resident taxing. It's not going to be allowed to happen anymore. There's going to be an annual vacancy tax as well. So we are aggressively chasing this market to make sure that housing becomes affordable again.
Thank you. Brian, it's your turn to answer.
Like I said earlier, our plan is to build 1.5 million homes over the next 10 years. But in order that, we have to empower the people. And how we empower the people is giving them good paying jobs. And a tradesman today, people used to laugh at a plumber. A plumber could make $100,000, create his own business and move forward and have, I know plumbers that have huge houses. And that's not just it. Speculation, I think that's wrong myself too. And I agree with some of my comments from both Marjorie and Sarika on how we can go forward with this. And part of what I think is collaboration between everybody to come up with the best plan to move forward. But to do that, we can't put a lock and chain around developers. They have to be able to make money or they are not going to do it. But we still have to protect our most vulnerable people. We have to protect our environment. And like I said in the previous presentation, I've traveled and I've seen glaciers melting in Iceland over the last 5 years, and it's terrible. And it's happening in our country. We're lucky we're water rich. We're lucky we have the resources we have. We've invested 500 million into Ford, uh, into General Motors and Honda to build electric cars to make us a more clean society. We've invested into DeFasco so they build electric furnaces instead of coke-fired furnaces. We're moving in the right direction. And all I'm going to say is, I wish Doug Ford could have done everything he could do if we hadn't had this COVID epidemic. And what we're looking for is to move forward with that, with this election. Thank you.
And for our next question, we'll go back to James Sebastian Scott. James?
Thank you. I heard from the previous one of the previous questions that talent has been something that we haven't been able to directly attract, and there's been problems attracting that talent to our region. So outside of the two-way all-day go question, how does your party plan to support the talent that we need in order to make sure that our tech industry and all the other industries that we support in our region are flourishing past the pandemic and into the future as well?
So Marjorie, you get the first answer.
I think our tech sector here is second to none. I think that we have such incredible talent. We are bringing and we are inviting in and attracting talent from all across the world at our world-recognized universities. There are so many startups in our community. How do we keep them here? Housing is a major thing. Education for their children is a major thing. Transportation becomes a major thing. A lot of this, though, also just revolves around community. When people are going to move to your area, they want to see the community that their families are going to move into. They want good schools for their children. They want to be able to find a place that will support them, support their startups. They want to be able to have mentors. They want to be able to have funding. And we're doing the job through places like Communitech, who are inviting people in to become a part of our tech sector. And they report to us that these other things are what are needed. It seems so simple, but if I'm going to move from one country to another country, I need to know that my family is going to be safe. I need to know my family is going to thrive, that the schools are good, that I can get from point A to B with ease, and that I can afford it. Right now, a lot of people can't afford to move to our region just for housing. Because while we know that these startups will generate enormous amounts of funds and will help people to get ahead, at the beginning, they're like all of us. They're just starting out with student loans that are going to kill them. So can we deal with affordability issues, homes, food, transportation, schools, education, and housing? Once we have that in a better situation, believe me, they will come because we have already built it and it's already fabulous. We just need to be able to have them stay with us. Thank you.
Brian, you'll get the next response or the
Thank
next
you.
answer. Thank you.
We have two of the best universities in the world, and we have the top college in Canada, Conestoga College, which is expanding. And hats off to Dr. John Tibbetts for what he's done. The accomplishments he's done with Conestoga and building the trades buildings he is now to train people is extraordinary. But I think we need to bring people from Ukraine that have gone through a terrible travesty, bring them here, bring their knowledge and their experience to Ontario. And Doug Ford has said that we can use these people. I know with my wife's team, she has people from Ukraine working for her right now that have moved to Canada, and they love it here. It's a good place. Let's make it better. There is so much here we can do. Affordability is a product, is a problem, yes, but they're high-paying jobs. And we can't control the price of oil. That's OPEC. We can't control what's happened in the Ukraine with the war, but we can do things to adjust to make it so these people want to move here. And a lot of people have moved from Toronto to here because it's less as expensive as Toronto. So really, it's not the worst story in the world. I don't like the high prices of real estate too. And we are going to do things to reduce that. But we need the talent and we need it in this area. So I want to make it happen. Thank you very much.
Sharika?
So labor shortage is everywhere. It is a good problem to have and a bad problem to have because we can't find the labor that businesses need or anybody needs. One of the things we have said is we will champion or improve the accreditation of foreign educated professionals. That is something we want to do so that we can bring them into the workforce. Today, they do jobs which are not in their field. So that is a way to tackle labor shortage. The other thing I would say, people were leaving the profession. Nurses have left the profession. Teachers have left the profession because of some of the damaging things that this Ford government had done by Bill 124. We are going to repeal Bill 124 and also help bring back. There's over 80,000 nurses out there, teachers, if I'm not mistaken, out there who have just left the profession and don't want to come because of the stress they face under a gutted system. So we want to bring them back into and help improve the labor shortage. We also want to take better control of our immigration in terms of having a say of who all can come and having a say in the type of immigration professionals that we bring into the region, making sure that we are aligned with the labor shortages of that particular region. That is something our government has, our liberal platform has proposed, and we want to do that. The other thing I would say is a regionally adjusted living wage, which I'm very proud of. It's something that we have said we would look into. Once you do that, you would allow people to stay in the community. Today, people are leaving and going for better jobs, maybe to Toronto because of a higher pay. However, the cost of living there is high. But having portable benefits that we have said we would introduce, living wages, these are all things which would help keep the talent in our communities and help address some of the labor shortages that we face, and also focus on trades. That's something we need. We have promised we would put a focus on it. Thank you.
Thank you. And that concludes the question and answer portion of our debate. Candidates will now have 1 minute each for closing remarks. We'll start in reverse order with Sharika. Sharika?
So thank you, first of all, for giving me this opportunity to be here and tell you about why you should be choosing me as your MPP on June 2nd. We need to build a place, Ontario, a place to grow, but only if we make the right choices. We need to rebuild what has always made Ontario strong: our education, healthcare, public services that support working families. They're all key to a better future and economic dignity for our families. The Ford Conservatives spent the last 4 years making all the wrong choices. This election is about choices. It is about affordability. We can choose soaring profits, or we can join the fight against poverty and make sure no one gets left behind. We can continue the sell-off of our public healthcare system while seniors suffer neglect in long-term care. Or we can heal the front line and help seniors age with dignity at home. We can build the Highway 413 over wetlands and farmlands, or we can invest $10 billion in our kids, bring back the choice for grade 13 and build safe schools across the province. We can continue to prioritize climate crisis, or we can take action to keep Ontario beautiful for future generations by slashing transit fares to $1 across the province, having protected land up by 30%, and also having 5 additional provincial parks. Cambridge can be a place to grow, but only if you make the right choice on June 2nd. The choice is yours. I hope it is Sureka Shenoy. Thank you.
Brian, Brian, it is now your turn to answer.
Thank you. Like I said earlier, if we hadn't had the pandemic, there's lots of positive things that would have happened with Doug Ford's government. Unfortunately, the attention went to COVID-19, and we did do other projects to move forward. We have a plan to build houses, to build infrastructure, to create higher paying jobs, to bring people into the province and to Cambridge to enhance our life. We have a beautiful city, a beautiful area to live in and to grow, but we need good paying jobs. We can't just keep cutting and cutting and cutting as other parties want to do. We have to grow. We have to improve our grid. We have to improve our environment as far as climate change. And we're doing that through investments into FASCO and cutting carbon emissions there, building electric cars and promoting that. This is the plan, and this is how we're going to do it. But business has to be able to flourish and to move forward too. It's our job as a government to help those businesses do it. We won't be hiring them, the business hired them. But we have to give them the foundation to move forward and the structure so they understand what they can do. And I hope on June 2nd that I will be your Cambridge MPP. And that's my goal. And like I said, I've been born here, I've raised here, I know the issues. I've seen everything change over the years, and I know it can be better. And that's why I put my name on the line to do this. Thank you very much. And before I go, I'd just like to say thank you to all the other candidates. It's a pleasure to talk to you.
Marjorie.
Thank you. We have heard in this debate about the different plans for how our community is going to be represented at Queen's Park. I am proud to be running on the Ontario NDP's plan. We have a bold vision for Ontario that truly puts people first. Elections are about choices. For far too long, we've had politicians with different priorities that have put their interests before ours. Cambridge deserves better. You deserve an MPP who knows and cares about this community, who will always work with the community to fix the things that matter most. I am running to be your MPP, to be a voice for action, bringing change, and an optimism for the future that invites everyone to sit at the table. Thank you.
This concludes our debate. Thank you to all the candidates for participating tonight. I'd also like to thank James Sebastian Scott. For CambridgeToday.ca, I'm Justine Fraser. Remember to vote this June 2nd, and good night.